let's go ahead and watch this one. Let's go ahead and watch, because we just did the Survivor one. Let's go ahead and watch his killer one, where he talks about what's wrong with, like, killer perks, because that's obviously, like, you know, the flip side of things. So let's go ahead and watch that as well, so we can get, like, the full picture.
You are looking at the current top 10 killer meta perks in Dead by Daylight.
That's not
However,
shocking. I don't see
these two
overcharge,
perks are
weird,
the reason you're most likely here, and they are creating the most boring meta DBD has ever had. So in this video, we're going to go over these perks, we're going to nerf them or rework them.
Well, I think Sloppy's on there because Sloppy and Jolt are on here because they're the free slowdown perks. That's why. I think that's why Sloppy and Jolt are here, is because they're the slowdown perks that are free.
In a more healthy position. Now, I already did a video on the top 10 Survivor meta perks in the game, so if you want to check that out, go ahead. But the important aspect of that is every change I'm talking about in this video goes in tandem with that video. So hopefully that clears up some confusion on the degree of the balance changes. Remember, the main idea with both of these videos is that players are using the same perks way too often, and that's lame. Of course,
Isn't that one of the things that led to problems like nerfing Corrupt when it was fine? Was just looking at, or nerfing Barbecue and We're Gonna Live Forever because even though they were fine, was that kind of logic? Wasn't this a bad thing that behavior did? Let's not emulate that, please.
There are bad perks that need buffed, but as long as these perks are as strong as they are, they will be too enticing for players to not
But the chart says!
If
the chart says!
too popular, it either needs nerfed, split into multiple perks, or it's an indicator of a larger problem and should probably become base kit.
Like
Take Borrow Time, for example, that was used 42% of the time before being made base kit. Also, when it comes to discussing Survivor perks, it's much more simple because there's essentially one Survivor character in the game. Everything else is just cosmetic. Killer, on the other hand, is significantly more complicated because there's 30 of them and they all function differently with different add-ons. So where a perk might be completely worthless on one killer, it can simultaneously make another killer impossible to deal with. Likewise, when it comes to killer meta perks, a lot of them are just gen defense. So keep in mind that when it comes to gen defense perks, they are sometimes not very good by themselves, but when paired with another perk, it's the synergies that make them.
Yeah, Deadman's is a totally fair and balanced perk on its own. Deadman's is fine. Deadman's is great. Deadman's is a perfectly balanced slowdown perk. Paired with Pain Res, where it forces value, a little different.
Strong. This is most noticeable when dealing with a killer running 4 slowdowns at the same time. That's why when it comes to my nerf ideas, making gen defense perks have terrible synergy.
The holy 3 perks of winning,
literally. Key goal.
The holy trinity of gen slowdown.
Before we talk about Eruption and Call of Brine nerfs, let's quickly talk about the #1 most used killer perk in the game right now, Scourge Hook Pain Resonance, with a 23% pick rate, which is actually 5% higher than it was before the meta shift update or MSU. So that's a fail on behavior's part. Now, Scourge Hooks have a massive RNG problem that I have talked about before, so I won't go over that again here as it's a separate issue. That said, Pain Resonance is rarely ever complained about, but it does have 2 legitimate problems. It makes already strong killers even stronger, and it does reward tunneling. So to start, I would make it to where Pain Resonance...
Yeah, because like the problem with Pain Res isn't necessarily like Pain Res itself. It's like, you can essentially, once you get somebody on a Scourge Hook, you can theoretically keep using that Scourge Hook forever, because all you have to do is just like come back to hook and either quickly down the guy that got the unhook or just tunnel the guy who came off hook and then just like reuse that same Scourge Hook over and over to like delete a gen by being obnoxious as hell. So like that's more that issue. That's why I think it was Fire that said that it would be a good idea if we just like rotate every time a Scourge Hook is used, because that would fix the RNG issues that people have with it on the killer side, and also stop the whole like just back to hook Andy and tunneling to get more value out of it. Is that, you know, certain Scourge Hooks no longer become Scourge Hooks after they're used once, and then it rotates to something else.
No longer activate if the same survivor was hooked twice in a row. That punishes the tunneling aspect. As for making already strong killers more powerful, that's a separate issue. Nurse needs nerfed, and I'm honestly tired of the bottlenecking that she brings to the game's design. In the future, Pain Resonance might need to be nerfed more in some way, but it's hard to know for certain until we get nerfs to overly oppressive killers and more problematic gen defense perks. The next 2 perks are Call of Brine and Eruption at an even 18% pick rate. Like
you guys know how I feel about this. I'm going to say it very quickly though, if somehow this is the first video you have found on my channel. The problem with these perks, I don't like them, and it's because they activate after a single dry kick. Obviously, Eruption, you still have to down someone, but like a dry kick is supposed to be something that's weak in the game and not really get a lot of value out of because it's so easy to do. Dry kicks take no skill. It's very easy to do, so it shouldn't be worth a lot. These perks make it worth a lot to just dry kick a gen. That's why they're strong.
A perfect match made in Borathon Hell. Also, neither of these perks were meta before the MSU.
Yep.
Now, the fundamental truth is that one of these perks has to be reworked entirely. Even if both of them were nerfed, they would still create incentive to 3-gen when paired together. Now, originally I thought Eruption was the main evil here because it's the most noticeable boring perk due to the incapacitated status effect. However, after discussing this with other content creators, I've come to the conclusion that even though Eruption 100% needs a rework, Call of Brine is the truly problematic perk between the two of them. A killer only gets value from Call of Brine.
You get info and free slowdown for a dry kick. Info and free slowdown for a dry kick. Info and slowdown for a free dry kick. Oh, not info and slowdown. Yeah, info and slowdown. Yeah, I said the right thing. Info and slowdown, just for a dry kick. You kick you just go. You get all of that. All of that, just because that's it. How did they think this was a good idea?
By protecting a generator, whereas Eruption requires a killer to down a survivor to get value. So since I believe Eruption is salvageable, I would change it by making any gen you've kicked be blocked for 25 seconds once downing a survivor. No more 10% gen regression, no more swift advantage over solo queue players, no more information for the killer.
Yeah, so like this would also be a good idea because like the problem with incap is you can't do anything else. You can't go heal someone. You can't go start another gen. You essentially have been told, sit in timeout, you dumb, stupid baby. Because you were trying to do the main objective of the video game. Which is stupid. But if you make it to where it's just, you can't tap that gen. Which is supposed to be the point. That's why you get the end cap, is because they don't want you tapping the gen and finishing it anyway. That solves the problem too.
And of course, no more incapacitated status effect. All that's left is a perk that buys the killer a little time and puts survivors in a situation where they need to make a choice whether to wait out the block timer or go for another gen. No more regression is key here. Moving around the map is more interesting. Redoing the same gen 5 times in a single match is not. Now that's already—
Yes, this is the problem with this meta. And I'm sorry that I keep harping on it, but I will harp on it until it's not true. I'll be brief, I promise. There is no situation that a dry kick should be causing you to redo the same gen 5 times. Back in the day, if you had old pop, where it was just a flat value, it wasn't proportional, and you forced them to redo the same gen 5 times, they were being greedy on a gen, and they were having bad chases. That was the survivor's fault. Now, you can just do that to any gen, for free. No situation in this game should you be causing somebody to redo the same gen 5 times for free. Stupid.
A massive nerf to Eruption, but with Call of Brine's rework will indirectly nerf Eruption more by removing their synergy completely. The new Call of Brine will now explode a generator for 5% damage and make it start regressing anytime a survivor is injured within 3 meters of the generator. 3 meters is an extremely short radius, but it could go smaller if needed. So essentially Call of Brine will now pretty much only work on stealth killers like Sadako, since it's her perk, Ghostface and Dredge, so on and so forth.
Might make it useless,
that's because no other killer can consistently hit a survivor that's that close to a generator. The survivor will almost always move further away once they hear the terror radius. Also, since the generator is regressing, it can no longer be kicked, and that removes all synergy with any other gen.
Yeah, that makes it useless. You don't want to make it useless.
Only 5% regression. There is no viable way to keep a 3-gen with this.
But that is a behavior thing, though. Behavior would do that. Behavior would just nuke the perk from orbit and then fix it later or never at all. That is a behavior choice. So that is unfortunately realistic, even though that does just make the perk completely useless.
Eruption and Call of Brine, you now have 2 gen defense perks that work entirely independent of each other. Eruption is now a perk that has a legit wager to it. If the killer can't get the down fast enough, they get no value. And Call of Brine, which helps stealth killers keep momentum, so they don't have to keep stopping to kick a gen 24/7. Now, overcharge is the last element of the gen kick cringe meta, but it's too early to say if it would be a problem or not. Without Cult of Brine, Overcharge will be significantly weaker and probably not an issue at all. Even right now, it's not in the top 10 picked perks, and I imagine it would become even less enticing after these changes were made. Next up, we have Barbecue and Chili at a 17% pick rate, down from being the #1 killer perk prior to the MSU at a 44% pick rate, and Lethal Pursuer, which is also at a 17% pick rate. Now, I was a bit lost on what to do with these perks, so I asked you guys. After reading literally hundreds of comments, there wasn't a single complaint about Barbecue and Chili other than the fact that it no longer gives a BP bonus. However, with Lethal Pursuer, there were a few concerns that the perk is again too strong on Nurse and Blight, which I have to say again, nerf the killers.
Yeah, nerf the killers.
It doesn't make sense to nerf perks because of killers that are overdue for nerfs themselves.
I agree.
So once that happens, we can
Lethal is fine. Lethal's a healthy perk for the game. Not S tier, strong A tier perk. It's just Nurse and Blight. They get way too much value out of it. Yep.
Visit these perks and see if they're still causing any problems at that point, although if there is something I've overlooked, let me know. Up next, we have Jolt at a 16% pick rate, which is 6% higher than it was before the MSU, so Jolt actually went up in popularity. Now keep in mind that Jolt is the only non-teachable gen defense perk in the game, so because of that, its pick rate is always going to be a little bit inflated. The only complaint about Jolt is that it's too oppressive on small maps like the game because it basically makes every gen explode.
That's the gamble, right? That is one of the ways the perk is balanced, is that it's a gamble. You may end up on a big map like Mother's Dwelling, and then your host, right? Like, honestly, I feel the same way about Jolt. I feel about Lethal. Strong A tier perk, not unbalanced in any way. Not unbalanced in any way, I don't think.
Every time a killer gets it down. So a simple fix is to restrict Jolt so that it can only damage a maximum of 3 generators, and that should keep it from getting out of hand.
I think it's
now we have Save the Best for last at a 15% pick rate, and it was not in the top 10 prior to the MSU. So this perk has quite a few problems that you
just cap it at 6. I don't know why they didn't cap it at 6. They gave, if you don't know, in the 6.1, the MSU he keeps referencing, they gave you 2 stacks of Stabiffle, Save the Best for last, on everybody default. So you as a killer have 2 stacks default by not running the perk. So the smart thing would be, if you want to use Stabiffle, you know, you only get up to 6 stacks instead of 8 because you're starting with 2. But they didn't, which I don't know. It seemed like the obvious change. I don't know why they didn't. I
have not even realized. It incentivizes ignoring one player an entire match, the obsession, which is super lame. It got indirectly buffed to the point where 8 stacks is essentially what 10 stacks would have been prior to the meta shift update. And lastly, it works better against solo queue players because Survive with Friends will usually try to have the obsession body block and annoy the killer as much as possible.
Remember that? Remember I did that? I wasn't even in a Swift. Remember that pig match where I kept like harassing her and forcing her to waste stacks, and I was like literally giggling about it? Yeah.
They're stacks away, whereas solo queue players will rarely do that. That said, there is one really great aspect to Save the Best for last, which is that it's typically not good on the strongest killers. It doesn't really add anything to their power, yet it's really good on weaker killers, so it helps diversify killer pick rates. So keeping all of that in mind, here are my suggested changes to Save the Best for last. The hit recovery gets nerfed to match the recovery speeds prior to the MSU, so almost more of a fix than a nerf, to be honest. Also, when the killer gets their first stack of Save the Best for last, the survivor, who is the obsession, will now get an icon on their screen similar to Dying Light that will let them know the killer has Saved the Best for last. This will help solo queue players make better choices on how to play. Lastly, every time the killer reaches 8 stacks, the obsession switches to a different survivor. This way, instead of one survivor being sidelined for the entire game, the perk will now be much more dynamic and allow for interesting new synergies. Next in line is Corrupt Intervention at a 13% pick rate, down from a 19%
Keep the lore.
pick rate
That's my
before the
instinct,
MSU.
but I don't know.
Now, Corrupt is a perk that has a lot of different angles to it.
Corrupt was fine. Should never have touched perk. It was fine the way it was. I do not know. Do not know why they touched it. Corrupt was a strong A tier perk. Not a problem. Now it's like I feel like it's like an A-, B+. It's not that heavy of a nerf, but it's noticeable that it's just like this was healthy for the game. Why did you affect this? Why did you touch this at all? It's just so weird.
So I'm just going to bullet point them. Unfortunately, it does make strong killers even stronger. It helps weaker killers have a chance on larger maps. It helps salvage matches with awful spawn logic. For those who don't know or use lethal pursuer,
some people pick things because they're nice and not because they're overpowered. Some people pick things because they're nice, not because they're overpowered. And that's something that, like, the devs just don't understand.
Very often, when all 4 survivors spawn in different corners of a map, especially a big one, it's almost a guaranteed loss because no matter which survivor the killer goes for, they lose 3 gens in the process. That's why good players always tell survivors not to group up on gens until the later part of the game. Back to the bullet points, poor Trapper needs corrupt intervention. Nerfing other gen defense will make corrupt's pick rate skyrocket, and it's a boring perk. No killer runs corrupt intervention because it's fun or interesting in any way. So in short, corrupt is very much a symptom of larger design problems. That said, I would personally rework it. Otherwise, it will be seen in the next meta nearly every match, which again is the entire point we're trying to avoid in this.
But corrupt is healthy. Like I know it would be picked a lot. And trust me, we went through the meta where it was picked almost every match. Corrupt's healthy. Corrupt was good for the game. Until the greater symptoms of the game change when it comes to, like, gen immediacy, map, gen spread. Corrupt's fine. Corrupt's fine. Hey, Asnar. Hopefully you're doing well today, friend. Yeah, perfectly fine.
Series. So with the new corrupt intervention, I would make it to where all 4 survivors would spawn together in a trial. This would be a healthier version of the perk that does nearly the same job in a less boring way. Really good players will understand the value of the new perk, but at the same time, it won't take over the meta completely like it would otherwise. Also, buff Trapper a bit, you monsters. Moving on to Nowhere to Hide with an 11% pick rate. Now, there's 2 main aspects to this perk we need to discuss. The first is that it's massively propped up right now because of the gen kick meta. Now, since that meta will be going away with these balance changes, this perk will lose a lot of viability. That said, this perk is actually stronger than it is right now. For those who don't know, Nowhere to Hide has been bugged since it came out. It's never worked properly. So how it works right now is when the killer kicks a gen, they see any survivor who's already within 24 meters of that generator for 5 seconds. If a survivor who is further than 24 meters away enters that radius after the gen is kicked, their aura is not shown to the killer. However, how it's supposed to work is after kicking a gen, the killer can see the aura of any survivor within 24 meters of themselves for 5 seconds, and the aura reading moves with the killer. Also, any survivors who enter the range then have their aura revealed as well. As you can see, it's meant to be much stronger, and that's a bit of a problem, especially on certain killers.
I think it's fine. So honestly, like, it's bugged, but like, I think it's okay the way it is. Does anybody else feel that way? Like, I feel like it's fine. It's a neat perk. Helps you find people. Really fun with range killers. Really fun with range killers, like a heat-seeking missile. I don't know. I think it's fine the way it is.
Healthier if the radius was tied to the generator instead of the killer, but it should still show survivors who entered the radius during the 5-second duration. In my opinion, that's the best middle ground, and I still expect this perk to drop in popularity severely once the gen kick meta is gone anyway.
That is true.
Up next is Sloppy Butcher with a 10% pick rate, and it was not a meta perk prior to the meta shift update. That said, there's nothing wrong with this perk at all at the moment. It's a perfectly healthy perk, and I'd rather talk about the perk below it, Bamboozle, which has a 9.6% pick rate. A lot of you voiced your opinions that Bamboozle is a bit problematic, and you swayed me. So a slight nerf to Bamboozle to make it more...
Bamboozle's not an interesting perk. It's not a fun perk, but like, it's one of those perks, like... Riddle me this. He said in the same video, let's not be too harsh on Stabiffle, because it helps mostly the weak killers in the game and not the strong killers in the game. But now he's like, let's nerf Bamboozle, but Bamboozle's the same way. Like you don't use Bamboozle on like Nurse, Spirit, Blight. Wesker's did use it when he first came out, not so much anymore. Artists, you don't use it on them. Oni, Pyramid Head. Start going down the line of all the good killers in the game. They don't use Bamboozle. Who's using Bamboozle? Clown, Myers. Legion, you know, like characters that aren't that great. Like, it's not an interesting perk, but like if we're going by the logic of like, hey, let's keep perks intact that are good for weaker killers, this is one of them. Sadako, great example. Sadakos love Bamboozle. Sadakos love Bamboozle. Yeah, it's just odd that the logic is not consistent there.
More fair is it would no longer activate on powers that vault windows. That means it would no longer work on Wesker or Legion if they vault a window using their
Even then,
ability.
Legion's not that
now,
strong.
Wesker and Legion
so.
players won't like that. I myself have used Bamboozle on Legion since the character came out, so I would feel this nerf too, but it does seem like a fair nerf regardless. It would still allow killers like Hillbilly and Leatherface to use their power as well, which is important. Okay, so with all of these changes, these are the only gen regression perks left in the game. Call of Brine with 5% regression, more about chasing than regressing. Hex Ruin, which was massively nerfed, now at a 6% pick rate. Jolt with 8% regression on a maximum of 3 gens at once. Oppression, which again is base regression speed, so nothing too oppressive there, ironically. Overcharge, which starts below base regression at 75% and works its way up to 200% after 30 seconds. Now that could still be problematic and would need to be adjusted if so, but like I said before, it's still a little bit too early to tell. Then we have Pop Goes the Weasel, which takes 20% of a gen's current progress, meaning the gen needs to be nearly finished to actually get the 20%. Yeah,
somebody said, or somebody did the math. I think it was Leo the other day actually did the math, and it was like a gen had to be at least 60% to get, I think it was like 61.2 or something like that. That would be like at least 60% to get like more pop value than you would like Call of Brine or like Painterez. Like pop, you need to have the gen at least 60% for it to be stronger than like the most meta perks right now. So, you know, like that's fine. It's good balance.
Value, Scorch Hook Pain Resonance.
Yeah, I don't know why oppressions have a long cooldown for a purchase assignment that
good. There's a
good.
good
It's really
chance
weird.
that even with the suggested nerfs that I put in, it might still be too overused, even for a Scorch Hook perk, so further changes would probably be necessary if that's the case. And that's
Pop
all
was
the
fine.
perks.
Pop was fairly balanced already, but the problem is that like it was a flat rate. So if you were in a situation where like you were gonna start a gen, you could just like delete it. Like the deleting of gens was like Pop's like issue, right? Like it was just it could just outright delete a gen because it used to be a flat rate. It didn't used to be proportional. It was just like if this had so much progress, just gone, you know. So that is, I know you still earn it through like downing somebody, right? But like, you know, that's like, you know, if you have, like, say you're in a situation where you need to break. Like, we want to talk about Call of Brine Eruption, which is what you just brought up, is like, well, it was earned, so therefore it's better than Call of Brine Eruption, right? Well, like, that was, like, the only, like, true example of that happening in the previous meta, before 6.1, was Pop on a barely started gen, is you really could just go over there and just gen gone, right? Like, we're talking about, like, we talked about with, like, the Hens video, how it's, like, you know, Call of Brine, like, over Brine Eruption can, like, you know, gen lock everybody and cost 3 gens, no matter what character you play. It doesn't have to be Hag. You could essentially lock down a 3 gen with any character. Pop, you could kind of do vaguely similar things, you know, where you could just like go over to a gen that they needed to complete to prevent a 3 gen, or in a 3 gen and just go gone, right? That was the only version of that we had in the previous meta. Only version of that we had in the previous meta. So like don't let over Brine Eruption and how like annoying that is. Rose-colored glasses, put on rose-colored glasses and see the past in a rose-colored lens, because some things about that were annoying and frustrating. I've heard people do that too. I've heard people say Old Ruin Undying was also healthy for the game because of Overbrine Eruption. I've also heard that take. Was that like Old Ruin Undying was fine for the game? It's like in some ways we move forward, in some ways we move backward, right? You can't just suddenly start looking in the past and be like, well, everything was fine back then because this is worse. It's like, no, it's fine, right? Like those things can still be problematic just because things in the present are more problematic, right? Undying was the most dull combo I've ever faced. Yeah, true, very true. Especially the old version where Undying was infinite until you ran out of totems. Screw that. Screw that. Shook by some of these. Yep.
perks. This would
GPS
really
blind.
be the first time DBD
it.
hasn't had a regression meta where survivors are forced to redo the same gens 10 times in a single match in a very
with Old
long
Tinker,
time.
yeah. Old Tinker as well.
When it comes to gen defense perks, there's 3 types: gen regression, gen blocking, and gen repair speed slowdown like Thanatophobia. So gen
blocking is the
regression
healthiest.
is boring. Gen repair speed slowdown, which was the previous meta, was also boring.
Oh yeah.
Now that only leaves gen.
You remember before
blocking.
Thana got its nerf? Remember when they first put through 6.1 and Thana was just like one of the strongest slowdowns in the game for like a patch? That was... Remember Forever Legion came back for a single patch in 2022 and it was the worst thing ever. Plagues were all running Thana again. Oh, that was terrible.
And it seems
Never
at this
again.
point that gen blocking is really the healthiest form of gen defense because it means less time on gens for Survivor. That means more.
Because gen blocking is a timeout. It's a, hey, let's go play the game. Let's go play the game. Let's take a break and actually go chase, get some totems done, heal a little bit, do the other things in the game for just a tiny bit. It's not redoing anything. It's not, you know, sitting on a gen with a red bar going like, you know, it's literally go play, keep playing the game, just play the game somewhere else and not on the main objective. That's it.
Around the map and more room for interactions with teammates and the killer. If you take the changes from this video and the Survivor meta video together, you have a new meta where survivors have less survivability and killers who can't stall the game out for eternity. This means faster paced matches, less crutching on boring perks for both sides, and ideally an actual new, interesting, diverse meta where we get to see more of the perks in the game actually get used. The final point I want to make is about 3-genning. Killers will always 3-gen if they can, regardless if there are perks or not that support it. The important part is that it's not a viable strategy to win every match. And even if the new version of Eruption can
which it is with BRINE Eruption, because you can just enact a 3-gen anywhere on the map, enact a 3-gen. Every killer's hag, like that meme that we made in that last video. Every killer's hag, literally every killer's hag. So like hags specialize in Trapper to some extent, specialize in just locking it down one area of the map and making it hell later in the match. Now you can do that with any killer on the roster as long as you brought the BRINE meta, because you can make a 3-gen and force people to come to certain sides of your map for free. It takes this thing that's supposed to be difficult and hard to do and makes it free if you brought the right perks. So, yeah.
10 to 3-gen to some degree. Without any gen regression tied into it, the survivors will easily win the war of attrition. The killer will no longer have the tools to maintain it. Alright, so there you have it. Those are my initial ideas. They're not set in stone. I can change my mind with intelligent
Apparently
discussions.
not with Windows.
So let me know what you think. And as always, thanks for watching and have a good one.
Yeah, that was way more like tame. That was way more like understandable. That was like way more understandable. There was no like crazy take like, hey, Windows is the main problem with the game. There's nothing like that. There's nothing like that at all, which, you know, I am thankful for. that was certainly something. That was certainly something. Yeah, I don't know. There's some things like Bamboozle he targeted. I was like, why? You know, like I feel like you guys are right in the sense that, like, to some extent, I feel like sometimes like Choy gets into these like moods where he is kind of like behavior where he just like, you know, see something that's commonly used as a problem, which is not something I agreed with when behavior did it, and I don't agree with it, you know, when, you know, people outside of the official company also adopt that mentality. I think it's just, I think you shouldn't nerf things just because they're used a lot, because sometimes, like, I don't know, like, here's a good example, like, I guess that, like, let's say, like, I don't know, like, if there was a restaurant, right? And their and the most popular item was like the cheeseburger, right? Everybody buys the cheeseburger. Cheeseburger's doing numbers for the company. Like they love this just the simple cheeseburger on the menu, right? And then let's say this restaurant, you know, they make a lot of money off the cheeseburger and they want to introduce the spicy chicken. Like they have a new promotion. They want to introduce a spicy chicken, right? And they put out all the commercials for it, and they want to like, and they you know, they do all these promotions. They buy an actor for the commercial, so it's like, you know, super popular. But everybody keeps buying the cheeseburger, right? Because the cheeseburger slaps. It's cheap, it tastes good, it's great. So that's like, what, but like by your guys' logic, like Choy, behavior, and some of you guys that agree with Choy and behavior, would it be like, okay, well, let's make the cheeseburger taste like let's like spit in the cheeseburgers. That way we can sell more spicy chickens. And that's bullshit. That's fucking dumb. That's stupid. Let's just start spitting in the cheeseburgers so we can sell more spicy chickens. What are you... Are you okay? like what is this? I've never understood this, and I never will. Let's start spitting in the cheeseburgers to sell more spicy chickens. I will never understand that. I will never understand that. I won't. Make the spicy chicken also good. I know you promote it a lot, but make it, like, cheaper. Make it taste as good as the cheeseburger. Like, do things to make that also good. Make that a good option as well. We don't spit in the cheeseburgers to sell the spicy chickens. Which is why I think this mentality's stupid. Like, if you think, like, when you're getting your big brain, you're in your little ivory tower, like, yes, I've played this game a lot. I have all the right meta ideas about the game. Let's just spit in the cheeseburgers. Like, but, like, you know, like, if you think about it in that idea, like, it sounds ridiculous, right? Like, there's no way you would go in there to your own restaurant and start sabotaging your own food to sell another food item. It's stupid. It would make zero sense. But because we're in this little, like, ivory tower of balance, it's like, you know, it makes sense to you to do that. Like, it's just like, I don't get it. I will never understand. It seems so silly to me. Spit in the cheeseburgers to sell the spicy chickens. But yeah, that's how I feel. TLDR, the weird takeaway today. Don't spit in your cheeseburgers to sell your spicy chickens. Actually, I'm gonna make that a quote so we can just, like, bring that. We can bring that up. I'm gonna add this as a quote. No context. Not saying who said it either. Spit in your cheeseburgers, sell the spicy chickens. Yeah, that is your TLDR. That is your takeaway. Don't spit in your cheeseburgers to sell your spicy chicken. If something is good and it works, it is not necessarily a bad thing. Don't sabotage a good thing to sell a new thing. That is a smarter way to say that. Don't sabotage a good thing because you're trying to sell the new thing. There we go. That's a good thing to end on. We did it. We did it, boys. We big-brained.